Here we're going to find the area in the curve that's represented from a z-value of 0 to a z-value of 2.34. Well, a z-value of 0 is exactly middle of our graph. So from the bottom all the way up to the middle is worth half our graph, which is 0.5. And then 0 to everything above is 0.5. So the total area would be, if we added, of course, these, would be 1. So that's the total area. Okay, but we're looking for the area from 0 to 2.34. Okay, so to find, the first thing we're going to do is go look and find the value for 2.34 in our z-table. Alright, so this is our z-table. Now the z-table we're using has both the negative version numbers and the positive numbers. Alright, so let's look. Let's go down here to 2.3. Okay, now if we look at the first column gives us would be 2.3, second one would be 2.31, 2.32, 2.33, and then here we have 2.34. Now I'm going to go up here to show you that until we come down to the 0.4, and then we have the 2.3. Okay, so that's going to be our z-value that we use. We're going to use that. Now, alright, so from our table we find that 2.34 is 0.9904. That's the table value. But the table value doesn't give us just the shaded area here. It gives us this area as well. Okay, and it keeps going. So it gives us all of this area. If we shaded all that in, that's what it's giving us. But we only want from the 0 to that. Now we could go look up the 0 value, but that's going to be 0.5 because, again, half of our graph is represented on the left. Okay, so to come up with our area underneath the curve, we take the 0.9904 and we're going to subtract 0.5 from it. Okay, and so we end up with 0.4904. Okay, and we're going to write that as a percentage. So 49.04% of the distribution is between 0 and 2.34 of our graph. And so that's how we could do that using our z-table. Alright, here's a similar problem. I'm not going to spend as much time looking up the numbers, but here we go. We'd go look up 1.8 and we find that in our z-table. Now when we find that in our z-table, we end up with 95.99. Okay, again, this is from the z-table. Okay, and so we want the number from 0 to this z-score. So what we'll do is we'll take the 95.99 and subtract 0.5 from it. Now when we do this, we always set them up so that we end up with a positive number. So you always subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. And so for this one, we end up with 0.45. So we end up with 0.4599. Okay, and so we're going to write that as a percentage again. So 45.99% of the curve is represented here. So 45.99%. Alright, now for this one, we're looking from 0 to z of negative 1.75. So we're actually looking from here to here for that area. Now, the process is going to be the same, but let's talk about what's given. Now, when we go look up the number in the z-table, what it's going to give us is the value up to the negative 1.75. So it's going to give us this. Alright, so let's go look up that number. Alright, here we're looking up negative 1.75. Okay, so that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we end up with 0.041. Alright, so from our z-table we came up with 0.0401. Well, that represents this area here. Well, we want this area. Okay, so to come up with that area, we know the whole thing's worth 0.5, so we're going to subtract again. So we're going to take 0.5 and subtract the 0.04 0, 1 from it. So we take 0.5, subtract 0.0410, okay, and we end up with 0.4599. Move our decimal over 2 places to convert it to decimal, so we end up with 45.99% of our data falls in here, okay? Alright, now here we're looking at information to the right, so we want to know everything that's above a certain score. Alright, so again, using the z-table, we'll go look up the 1.11, and we should end up with 0.8665. Okay, now, this shows us all of this. Okay, shows us all of this area in here, all the way back here as well. So that, but we want this. Well, we know the whole thing is worth 1, so what we'll do is take 1 and subtract 0.8665 from it, and we end up with 0.1335, okay, which is going to be 13.35%. Okay, now what do we do if it's to the left? Now, to the left, using an R table is going to be pretty straightforward, because that's what the value is given us. So what we'll do is we'll go look up the tabled value, which in this case would be 0.0268, okay, and we're just going to write that as a percentage because that gives us the area underneath here, so that'd be 2.68. Oh, sorry, percent. Okay, so to the left, that's what our z-table gives us. Alright, here we're wanting the area between two z's. So we're wanting this area for this one. So what we'll do is we'll go look up the the z-table values for both of these. Alright, if we look up 2.47, we should end up with 0.9932. If we look up 2, we should end up with 0.9772. Okay, but now remember that what's happening here is we're actually having an overlap, but if we look up the 9.772, it's given us all of this area, all the way up to it. Okay, and then if we looked up the 2.74, okay, I'm going to just kind of shade that in blue. Not only it's giving us that area and this area as well. Well, to take out this part, what we're going to do is end up subtracting the two numbers. And remember, we want to get a positive number because we're talking about area. So we'll take 0.9932 minus 0.9772. Okay, and so what we'll end up with is 0.016. Convert that to decimal, so we get 0.160%. Okay, so basically 1.6% of the area or the distribution falls between 2 and 2.47. Alright, here's another example of when the information we're looking for, the area is between two z-scores. So we go to the z-table and look up our z-score, the tabled values, and we get 0.006 for negative 2.48 and 0.2033 for this one. Okay, and so we'll take the difference between the two. So I'm going to take 2.033, subtract 0.0066, okay, and so we end up with 0.1967, okay, but that's 19.67%. So again, what we're doing is we're taking the table values and we're subtracting them. If you end up with a negative number, it's probably because you just subtracted in the wrong order. Alright, here again we have, it doesn't matter, they're on opposite sides of the mean. That doesn't matter. We still do it the same way as before. Look up our z-values and then take the difference. Alright, so when we look up our z-values, we end up with 0.0853 for the negative 137, and we end up with 0.9535 for this. So we take the difference between the two to get our area underneath the curve. Alright, and so when we do that, we should get 0.8682, which is going to be 86.82%. Okay, so that's the area under from negative 1.37 to 1.68.